You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 206. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. Today, my guest is an author and someone who has written the most beautiful novel that I have said in my reviews is a true love story meets meet cute meets Hallmark movie minus any of the cheesiness. It is a book filled with grief and loss and beautiful love, and is the story of how one woman loses her husband and finds love again after grieving him and while grieving him. And it is the most beautiful book I have read in a long time. I love a book that makes me cry at the end. This one had me crying from the middle to the end. Of course, I have yet to even say her name. It is Emma Gray, and her book is The Last Love Note. It is out today here in the United States. She is Australian, and the book was out January of this year in Australia and is out today with Zibby Books. Emma is so wonderful, and I can't wait for you to hear from her and to pick up your copy of The Last Love Note. Hi, Emma.
Hello, how are you?
I'm so good. I'm so happy and excited to talk to you. You've made me cry, but now it's making me smile to talk to you. So can you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yes, thanks, Michelle. It's lovely to be here. My name's Emma Gray, and I'm Australian, if you can't tell from my accent. I'm the author of a novel called The Last Love Note, which is coming out with Zibby Books in the US. And I'm currently sitting in a hotel room in New York, which is a dream come true, as part of my book tour here in the States. This is a book that means a lot to me personally because I lost my husband, Jeff, in 2016. And I knew that I would need to write about this loss to make sense of it. And I sort of thought about a few different ways that might happen over the couple of years after he died. You know, could I write a memoir or would I write a self-help book? And in the end, it turned into a bit of a romantic comedy novel. So it's a novel that encapsulates all of the pain of grief, but with a lot of light and shade and humour and with a second chance love story attached.
It's absolutely beautiful. I compared it to I did a review on Goodreads, and then there's a video review coming out with Zibby that I say it's a true love story, meet cute meets Hallmark movie, but without any of the cheesiness.
Oh, yes, yes. And I'm a big fan of Hallmark movies, so that's a great comparison.
Me too, even though they're all the same. I keep telling
I
my
love
daughter, I'm
them.
like, someone's gonna try to kiss, someone's gonna open the door, they won't kiss, but in the end, they will live happily ever after. So,
That's it.
but it's beautiful. The book is, I cried from the middle, and let's talk a little bit about what it's about. Cam is the husband, and he has dementia very early in life, and he writes all of these Post-it notes to remind himself of things around the house, hence The Last Love Note. Share how you came up with this before I start crying while interviewing you. How did you come up with this whole plot line and all the
Well,
hunky men that are in it? And
oh, I know, they're just such a dream. They've pretty much ruined all real life men for me now. But uh, the it's interesting because I'm one of those writers that doesn't plot the novel. And so I just had a concept of a woman who would be around 40. She's lost her husband, and there will be a story about processing his loss while falling in love again. And that's all I knew when I started. And I actually don't like to know much more than that when I start writing a book, because it's the exploration of that that keeps me going and keeps me wanting to, sit down at the computer every day and get this story out. It's almost as if I'm watching a movie and just trying to desperately keep up with the action and the dialogue and get everything down on paper that's folding in front of me. And it's a really fun process to write, but also quite hair raising, because you don't know at first whether this story will work out and how it will all fall into place. And in fact, there was one very hair raising moment when I had to get the structural edit back to my editor, and because it came out in Australia with Penguin Random House earlier in the year, and I had to get the structural edit back, and we all came down with COVID. And my dog was in the 24-hour veterinary hospital with meningitis. And it was just one of those awful, dark times in our lives. And I remember thinking, I think I could just restructure this book. And so I picked up enormous passages and moved them around in the Word doc and posted that on Facebook. And my agent sort of had a panic attack, and um, and I'm sure I was delirious at the time with COVID. And I thought I'll get up in the morning and reread and make sure it makes sense. And then of course I woke up the next morning and was so unwell I couldn't do that, so I just sent it off. Anyway, the publisher loved it, so it was. I wish I could say there was a more sort of routine-driven and more professional-sounding approach rather than this chaotic style. But I guess that's what creativity is, isn't it?
It makes me happy to hear, actually, because as I'm writing what might be the next book, what will be, I've got two different docs going. They're completely different. And depending on my mood, or like I'll be in the shower and I think of something and I come out in my robe and my hair's in a towel and I'm typing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, but this has to come in. And I have no idea where this is going. And I'm thinking I need like multiple folders with multiple docs for each thing. It's a mess.
Version control is terrifying at times. My agent is really great on this. She says to me, whenever we're starting a first draft of a new book, she said, just race to the end and then worry about fixing it up later. And I think that's true. We have to embrace the mess of the writing process, because for all of us, and particularly if I'm finding this writing another book, that the last love note has been through 11 drafts in Australia before it even got to the US. So,
Oh.
and that included editorial drafts, proofreading, all of that sort of thing, and then some more editing here with the US editors. And so then when you turn around and sit down to write a new book, you think, can I even write anymore? What am I writing? What are these words? Because you're comparing it in your mind to something so polished. And we do this whether we've written books before or not, because we're comparing them to all the books we've read and the ones that we've picked up off the shelf in a shop, which of course are fully edited and have had so much work done to them. And I think we need to be really gentle with ourselves in this first draft phase, because we need to embrace that mess and just race through to the end, and then we've got something to work with.
So you bring me to two questions, because I want to know what your background is, where we've come to today, that Emma's in New York with this book tour. And how did that happen that you have a book that was published by Penguin Random House in Australia, and then you're here in America under the Zibby Publishing House?
Well, I can only say that it seems like some sort of magical miracle, really. I ask myself this question every day: how did I possibly get here? It seems like a dream. It is a dream come true. My agent, Anjanette Fennell of Story of Life Literary in Australia, sent the novel to the editor at Penguin, and she loved it, and that the book came out there. And then Anjanette had been following Zibby and following just everything she does. And the Zibby does so many different things that I don't know how she
Mm-hmm.
does it. And so she's listening to her podcast, Mums Don't Have Time to Read Books. And she said to me, she said, I just feel like this woman would be so aligned with this story, and it would be great to get you on her podcast in the US. And so she sent Zibby a message in Instagram, DMs saying, "I've got this novel. Would you like to have a read and perhaps, with a view towards interviewing me on the podcast?" So Zibby, who is just so gracious and so excited about everyone's books, said yes, and we sent that through on the Friday. And by the Saturday, I think Zibby took it with her on a flight. She started reading it, and then as soon as the plane landed, she sent Anjanette a message and said, "Have you sold the rights to this book in the US?" Which was not what we'd be. We just wanted to get me on the podcast at this point.
Yeah.
And so then by the Wednesday, I was having a Zoom meeting with Zippy and about 8 different people from her team. And I was sitting at home in Canberra, Australia, with my little dog and in my little kitchen and having this unbelievable meeting with Zibby in the US, in New York. And we'd had this recall of some spinach in Australian supermarkets, and they said it was causing hallucinations. And I remember thinking, have I had a lot of spinach lately? Is this really happening? Then by 7:30 that morning, she'd already emailed Penguin Random House with an offer on the book. So it was so different from previous experiences I've had as a writer. So this is my first adult novel, but I've got a couple of teenage novels out as well in Australia, and a couple of other books that are nonfiction. And of course, I'm much more used to the whole roundabout of submitting books and getting rejected, and having to hold on to that persistence and keep the faith that it's going to work, and be picked up by your friends and family every time you fall in a heap when another publisher says no. So I've been through all of that. To turn around and have something like this happen that feels just like some sort of fairy tale was just something from another world. And Zibby's whole approach is just so different to. I just feel, sitting here beside a beautiful bunch of flowers in this hotel in New York, thinking, I feel like I'm pretending to be an author. It's I've got a movie about this. I just am so grateful for everything. And it's also then the book's been picked up as Book of the Month, with the Book of the Month.
Yes.
And so I've been spending my days responding to the most amazing messages from readers, some of whom are reaching out and saying that they've been through loss themselves and they're halfway through and they just needed to reach out and talk to me about it. And so that's just such a privilege to have those kinds of conversations as well.
When did the book come out in Australia compared to this is going to air that when it is launching in America? So between next week, today, and Australia, what was the time difference between the two?
It came out in January in Australia, so it's almost a year.
So this
So
is
it's
like the
actually,
biggest book launch tour anybody
I
could be
feel like
on,
that.
right?
It has felt like I've been switched on with promotion now for nearly a year, which is not, I think in future, in fact, I do have a book coming out with both the same publishers next year, and it's going to be a much closer event, which will make it a lot easier. Because I was talking to a friend who said, really, with writing, you have seasons. You've got the season of writing, then the season of editing, and then the season of publication and promotion. And I feel as though I've had all those seasons at once all year. So that's been exhausting, but exhausting in a wonderful way.
I love it. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
Tell us, what was your background? What have you been doing? What's your career been like that has brought you to today? Because today is really freaking exciting. So what did that look like?
I spent 10 years, my early part of my career was 10 years in the Australian Public Service, so doing administrative jobs, where I would sit there all day thinking, I can't wait to get home and write my novel. And so I'd identified as a writer ever since I was 14, and fell in love with Anne of Green Gables, and fell in love with the fact that she was a writer, and recognised in myself that same drive to write and be published. And I never stopped writing from that moment. And so I had a book published in 2005, which was a memoir of working parenthood based on the chaos in our family. And then I hadn't written a novel until my daughter was 14, and she hated reading, but she loved Harry Styles. So I thought I'll just write a
He was
little
on
story.
repeat while I wrote my book. He was on
Oh, there you
repeat.
go. Yeah, and he's been on repeat in the family for years. I feel like I'm his future mother-in-law, because both my daughters are gonna marry him apparently. I don't know how that's gonna work. But,
He might enjoy that. He is a little eccentric, so that could
yeah,
be okay for
that's
him.
right, yeah. So I wrote, this novel called Unrequited about a boy band and a girl who's a singer and songwriter and hates this boy band, and of course inevitably ends up with one of them. Anyway, that became this bigger than Ben-Hur project, which turned into a 2-book deal with HarperCollins in Australia. And then my high school friend, who is a composer and has won some big Australian music industry awards in Australia, back home, sent me a message and said, "I love this book. I have to write a musical about it." So the two of us co-wrote a musical, which we put on in my daughter's high school,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it was the most joyous. And this was all happening around the time that Jeff died. So, and he knew about this project and was, he actually wasn't a fan of musicals, but was a big fan of me following my dream. So he was so supportive. And we put the show on in 2017, which was the year after he died. And you might think that's counterintuitive to stage a glitzy high school show with disco ball and glitter cannons and all of that, but it was actually the thing that saved me. It was just a beautiful experience. And then I went on to write this book about grief and loss and love, and it's really a very hopeful story, and hopelessly romantic as well, I think.
It is. Yes. I'm like, take me to the beach. I want all the things. I want the walks, and yes, and to have Hugh say, you need the beach house. You need to go. And
Yeah.
yes, yes, me too, Hugh. Me too.
Yes.
I absolutely loved it. And so now you're writing another book or
Yes.
is it done already?
Yeah, it's in editing at the moment, so still working on the editorial process. But it's a psychological thriller and romance all in one.
I feel like it's like all over the board in like such a
Yeah,
good way. Like it's so much fun that you're not choosing just one, it's not I
yeah,
read all romance novels and this is it. And you're
yeah,
like, no,
yeah,
there was teen stuff. And then I went on and helped write a musical. And now there's a love and grief. And I've done nonfiction. I love it. It gives me hope that you don't have
yeah.
to stick to one genre.
Well, I think that's right, and I mean, I'm sure there'd be people that would advise against that, but but I think you
You're
have to
having
go.
success.
Well, you have to go where your heart takes you. And my agent often says that to me. She said, write the project that you're called to write at the moment. And she has never once said, we need more of this, or looked at the market and said, right, this is the stuff that's selling, we need to write something along those lines. It's always driven by where my imagination wants to take me and where my heart is. So I don't think you can go wrong in writing from that place. I think that's the key, and you never want it to feel like a job. Although parts of it always will. I mean, there's an awful lot of the editing process that's like a job, that is a job. But and writing's very hard. It's very hard to write a novel. It's you do tear your hair out during the process, but it's just so rewarding, and it's something that I can't imagine not doing. People talk of I turned 50 recently, and one of my friends posted on Facebook that their husband had just retired, and it's the first person in my circle that's announced their retirement. And there was a part of me that just thought, retired? I feel like my career is just starting, and it
Yeah.
and I also can't imagine never writing or saying, right, that's it, I'm finished writing now. It's not that sort of thing that you can. I think you just it's within you and part of you, and it's who you are.
I feel like being an author is a very different career than working a 9 to 5 or a corporate job, or, it does feel like you could retire from a regular job, but then
Yes.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay, now what? Well, I could
Yeah.
see myself writing. It's like journaling also, these are things that if they're bringing you pleasure and joy and you can do it, and then you can make money too while doing it, who would
Yeah.
retire?
That's it. And in fact, I've got other work that I do as well. And of course, I'm a single mum since my husband died, and so with 3 kids. And so, most writers will tell you that you do need to be doing other things as well. But all of my other work now tends to involve writing. So I do copywriting for businesses and governments and that sort of thing. But I've also been an accountability coach. My colleague Audrey Thomas and we wrote a book called I Don't Have Time, which is about productivity. But she and I have been offering accountability coaching for about 10 years in Australia, which is my career that I had after I left the public service. And so that's also brought me a lot of joy. And I think I'm just one of those people that loves variety in life. And,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a bit scary at times because, you're jumping from one thing to another and don't know, where, where the next paycheck's coming from. But I think it keeps life interesting.
And what do your kids think about all of this? All three of them?
Well, two of them are with me on this book tour, and the other one is being entirely supportive from home. And they're just so proud. Honestly, I had them with me last night. I did an event at the New York Public Library, which was this incredible moment of coming full circle for me because I actually wrote the opening lines of the book in the New York Public Library in 2017.
Oh, I got chills.
Yeah. Jeff was a military historian and he was sort of internationally well regarded. And there was a conference over here that they flew me over for. And I'd been at this conference in Jacksonville that was in his memory and spoke at that about him. And it was the first time I'd been away from my kids. It was not 8 months after he died. And I really hit rock bottom. I was going back to my hotel room at night and just crying. And, it was like being at a second funeral, really, because everyone was talking about him. And it was beautiful, but it was just incredibly difficult. And then I came to New York for the first time just for a couple of days and fell in love with this place. And I thought, for the first time since he'd died, I felt a glimmer of hope for my own future. And I think it was because New York has experienced so much grief, and yet it's just so vibrant and exciting, and it continues on. And I sort of took that message on board for my own life. And I thought, I need to go to the library and start writing something, even if it's just a symbolic start of this novel that I'm going to write. And so the day I flew back to Australia, I went there and I took a photo of my computer with the opening lines of this book. And there was just something about that day. As I walked down the steps of the library, I felt like I'm going to be back here one day. And I don't know how or why or when, but I just had this sense that I would be. And then 2 nights ago, I walked out of the hotel and stood in front of the New York Public Library in the dark. And I got so emotional about the full circle, event of coming back here with my New York publisher, speaking at the New York Public Library. And I just felt for that earlier version of me that had walked down those stairs, 6 years ago, absolutely devastated, struggling, emotionally overwhelmed. And I knew what, now I look back in retrospect, I knew what she was going into and all the difficulties to come in the next few years, but also just this real sense of pride to have pulled together this book and to have now been able to bring back my children and have this beautiful tour in this gorgeous country. It meant the world to me.
This is the best story ever. This is incredible. I absolutely love hearing how it all has come together and just so beautifully, and it's like kismet. Like this is a Hallmark
Yeah,
movie.
it is. It is.
It is. You are a Hallmark
Maybe
movie.
I just need to go and stand on the steps of the library and wait for my Hugh to appear out of the,
Yes.
streets. That would be the only thing
Yes.
the only thing left to
Oh,
happen.
I bet we can in New York, yeah, we can do that. We can
Yeah.
absolutely do that. If you don't do it this trip, we'll do it next month,
Okay.
in January. We
Yeah.
will just stand there. We can get there's dude with a sign. I don't know if you follow him on
Yeah.
Instagram, but he's the one with the
Right.
cardboard sign
Oh,
who always
yeah.
has maybe we can get him to do a sign.
Right.
Emma's
Yes.
looking for her Hugh right here.
Nothing desperate about that, but no, that's fine.
No, no, no. Other people will be involved. It
Oh, yeah.
won't just be you. Yeah,
It'll
we'll
become
we'll we'll make it happen.
one of those big stories that'll go viral and, somebody will step out of the shadows somewhere. Yeah, I can
And then
see
you
it
will have
happening.
another book to write about.
That's right.
I love it. I was since it is a book of the month club pick, I have a friend who And we met actually because of Zibby's bookshop. Her sister lives here in town. She lives down Los Angeles area. And I was like, I'm going down to the opening of the bookshop. And the one sister's like, my sister lives there. You should meet up. So strangers who have become friends. And she posted the other day that she was reading your book and absolutely loving it on her drive up here. And I went, oh, I have Emma coming on my show. Her name's Helia.
Yes.
She tagged
Yeah.
you,
Oh,
and she's like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh my god, you're gonna have Emma!" I'm like, "Oh yes."
Oh, that's so amazing. We've been chatting.
I love, she's adorable, and
Yeah, she is.
she'll listen too, so she'll be excited that
Oh, hello.
her name has been
Lovely.
mentioned once again.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean,
But
that
I
that
love
sort of
it.
well, that sort of thing from readers is I mean, because when you write a book, you hope that people might engage with it and like it. You're terrified about the response, you're worried about criticism
Yes.
and reviews and all of that stuff, if you even get it published in the first place, which is also a fear. There's so many of these steps as a writer that are quite terrifying. And so to have readers like her respond in that way just means so much. It's just so comforting, reassuring, encouraging, and exciting.
And I love that. I feel like, I don't know if it's because I'm talking to more authors, but I feel like we can connect more with authors,
Yes. Yeah.
probably because of social media, but we can reach out and get to know you as an actual person,
That's it. And I've
which
had a
is
couple of people do that and say they've never done it before. That's the first time they've reached out to an author and they didn't know if they should. And I just think, gosh, authors are desperate for people to reach out and say, hi, I like your book. It's just always so lovely. And I think with this one in particular, the way that people are reaching out has been really sort of extra special because a lot of them are sharing about their own life stories and their losses, and that is one of the reasons I wrote this. I just think we don't talk about grief enough, and we don't do it well, and certainly not in Australia. And it's one of those taboo topics almost. And so to be able to write a piece of creative fiction that can get a conversation going that might be comforting and helpful, is a big part of the dream come true aspect of this for me.
It's absolutely beautiful. And you put into perfect words what the book is really about, because there is grief and loss and there's sadness, but at the same time you feel so warm inside and happy, and it's just adorable. And for some reason the moment that just popped in my head is when she's in the dressing room and she's like half dressed and she's on FaceTime and then he's walking in. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're a hot mess, sister."
Yeah. Well, that part of the story is all very much based on my own personality because, I have a lot in fact, that entire grenade scene at the start of the book is based on reality. So
Oh.
we had all of that minus the hot neighbor and although my new neighbors like to think that's about them. But I all of that was straight out of real life. I didn't have to look far to find the hot mess aspects of her character.
I love that. Oh, everybody has to go read that because the opening, yeah, it's beautiful. You've got your wine and now all of a sudden the bomb squad's coming, and
Yeah. The bomb squad visited
it
our
sounds like
house.
something that could happen in my house too. My
Yeah.
husband's a World War II like lover.
Well,
Like we have all kinds of
yeah.
things, and a World War II Jeep is in the garage, and I wouldn't know half of what we have. So a
Well, that's
grenade
true.
could be
Well,
here. I
it's
don't
it's not a
know.
stretch. It's not a stretch of the imagination. I actually was interviewed on the radio in Australia the other day about that because another story happened in our city where somebody just walked into a police station to hand in a grenade that they'd found at home, and it caused a massive security incident. And so the local radio station said, "Would you like to come on air and talk about your book?" And so I'm on air talking about this, and then there was nothing but people calling in saying, "I've got a grenade." So, it's quite a
Oh.
common thing. A lot of people collect memorabilia, and it's quite terrifying what people have in their houses.
Oh my goodness, that's hilarious. That what a great way to promote the book.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. You are absolute pleasure. I am so excited that we got to talk and I got to read your book and that we're going to see each other in person in less than
Oh,
2
thanks,
months.
Michelle. Yes.
Congratulations on all of this. You deserve it so much. I can't wait for the next book. Where can everyone find you, follow you, and buy the book?
If they follow zibbymedia.com, there's a whole lot of stuff on there about my book and also all the other books that Zibby's Publishing. And then on Facebook and Instagram, I'm at Emma Gray Author, Gray with an EY.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your stay. And I can't wait to share with the world your beautiful book.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. I so appreciate your enthusiasm.
What an absolute delight Emma is. I cannot wait to meet her in January. She's just that story of being in the New York Public Library and coming full circle was absolutely beautiful. And it truly reflects the kind of writing that she does. She is incredible. I can't recommend The Last Love Note enough. It was such a good read. So please do yourself a favor and go grab this and grab a box of tissues while you're at it. If you can join us, Zibby Books is having an author event in January in New York. So I will be there and 40 other plus authors will be there. I cannot wait to meet all of these people in person. It's going to be amazing. And as a reminder, I'm plugging away. How to Get on Podcast is available for pre-order now. Don't forget, the pub date has been moved to January 11th. And right now, if you follow me on TikTok or Threads, I am doing 50 tips for the 50 days counting down to the launch of How to Get on Podcasts. You can purchase it anywhere you love to buy your books. Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, Amazon, Books A Million, all of the wonderful places. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you soon.